Bogdan, welcome to the show.
Yes, welcome and good morning. Yeah.
It's quite an honor to have you on the show. It's actually the third IRSE president that I interviewed for the podcast. I will probably have links to the other conversations in the show notes or at the end of the video. Um, I wanted to ask you to give our listeners a quick summary of your CV, but I did already a little bit of research beforehand. And I think there were some quite distinct phases in your CV, starting about 40 years ago in Poland. So tell us a bit about this, how the industry looked like when you got into it, when you started off.
Yes, so yeah, it was very much challenging time. Okay, I was working with Research Institute in Poland as my first job. And then colleagues were telling me, slowly, there is no need to speed up with your technology, electronics technology, because this is what I studied. Just relay interlockings and are fine, relay technology is fine. Look, we have still mechanical interlockings. And you won't see it directly, maybe, but you go there outside and you see a misery, really, this 1980s, very challenging for maintenance teams. In fact, the institute sent me very quickly for a kind of stage outside. So I was spending 6 months on the rails, watching what the maintenance teams were doing. And I said, no, it can't be like this. It must be changed. It is not really our future. After my study about electronics, what I saw there was really like amazingly bad. And I said, no, this world must be different. So this was the start really, which encouraged me to work with railway research and especially railway signaling research and train control. And this is where I started really. Yeah, so it was completely different world. If I go back to Poland now, it's really different and it's encouraging me that it can be better.
Yes. So it's interesting when you say that your older colleagues kind of try to slow you down. Like this, all this modern electronic stuff comes way too early, and that reminds me of the quote: "It's always too early until it's too late."
That's
That's
correct.
probably
Yes, yes, that's correct. I think that okay, you have also to understand that I was one of the very few people who were like in their 20s, and my older colleagues who work already like for 20 plus years, they were watching us and saying, "Ooh, something wrong coming here." Yeah.
yes. Then the second phase of your CV, I need to cut this shorter. We can't possibly cover 40 years of rail experience in a 1 hour podcast without talking about other things as well. So the second stage that I kind of identified from your profile was when you came to the Netherlands and you worked on ERI in 1991, um, where you were involved again in a new technology just emerging as a thought concept, and that was ETCS. Tell us a bit about that one.
Oh yes. So it is almost 35 years now when I went to the Netherlands. So it's a lot of time. And yes, the first years really I was involved in innovations, and one of the innovations I was involved with was European train control system. So between 1992 and 1996, European Rail Research Institute was responsible for developing first system requirement specifications for ETCS. And it was very much technical job in terms of specifications, functionalities. Uh, Looking back now for like many, many years further, I see that we take less attention to operational and organizational and also financial parts. But it was great job. It was a team of about 15 people led by Mr. Bank Sterner, Swedish guy, who was very special one, but was perfect about innovations. And this was, like click. He had clear ideas, and we were busy really to put those ideas on paper and challenge those ideas. So it was great time. And this was where I worked very much internationally. The team was really multinational, and everybody brought his own ideas and experiences. So it was fantastic.
So if you look back at the last 35 years of ETCS, first the concept development and the development of the system requirement specification that you were involved in, that was later taken over by Unisig. So looking back at the last 35 years, where do you think we stand with ETCS? Are you satisfied? Are you disappointed? Are you something in between?
I think obviously I'm disappointed because the pace of deployment is very, very slow. I am pleased looking at Belgium, where I was involved in overseeing the project where the infrastructure is now completed. But I look on the big countries like France or Germany, where it is really single percent of deployment at the moment. And I think we lost a lot of time. And there could be thousand and one of reasons. I always say that the ETCS is a system which is different for every country. Every country has a different starting point. Those ones who have like German LZB won't be fast really deploying ETCS. There are other countries with had like no ATP system, and for the safety reasons, they wanted to be like much faster than others. So the starting point was different. And I think the also the reason was different. One was because of the obsolescence, the other one was because of safety, and another one really look for capacity. Uh, and I think that also it's like about people. I say system is there, it's about people. So people really do it or not, or do it better or worse. And I think that it also is about project management qualities. In Belgium, they said, okay, this is the scope, this is the time, this is the budget, we do it. In other countries, there were still discussions about now, is this baseline 2 or baseline 3 good enough? Do we need to wait for changes or new systems? So this was really like slowing down the things. So I think, yes, summarizing, I am a little bit disappointed, but I think it still lies with people, not really with the system itself.
Yeah. Well, my impression, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong there. My impression was that one of the benefits why it went so well in Belgium was that they really had a strategic approach to it. So they didn't see ETCS as a number of projects. They saw it as a countrywide program with several implementation stages. And I think that's a very different approach from other countries where you do one ETCS project in one part of the country, and then a few years later, you do another project in another part of the country, which often has very different project specific requirements. And the outcome then is much more like a patchwork of different ETCS flavors, if you will, compared to countries that have um, a consistently applied specification. Now, so Belgium comes to mind. I think Norway is another example. Denmark, probably to some extent. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you think the reasons for the success in Belgium are in a different place?
I think there are obviously this is complex issue. It's not a single reason. Uh, in first instance, I think we deal obviously with public procurement, which also influences the way how the things are done. In case of Belgium, it's only one of the two countries where a system was really obliged by law. And there are two countries only in the world. One is Belgium, the other one is US with positive train control. And I think this helped a little bit. But you are absolutely right that those ones who implement ETCS need a vision, countrywide vision, because otherwise it is very difficult to keep the story the same. If it is Australia with the states, if it is Germany with federal states, there will be always reasons like funding, way of funding, or people who will yeah, dilute from the original objective and make it different. Yeah, so absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's basically the segue already in the third stage of your CV, which is a senior role in Mott MacDonald. It's a big global international consultancy. And I think in that role, you went through a number of programs, including some quite good visibility of ETCS in different countries. You did mention Belgium. I think you had some involvement in ETCS in other countries as well, didn't you?
Yes, in fact, I was very lucky to be invited to review various programs, including Danish program back in 2018 and 2020, program in Brisbane, and obviously my own country in the Netherlands. So I'm really involved now in a kind of advisory committee to look how we can do better.
Hmm,
So
interesting.
this
Yeah.
yeah this gives obviously benchmarking perspective of yeah, how the people are implementing ETCS, and you see very often yeah same mistakes or same trends, if I can say so, in doing things. Whereas I think that yeah, it's a project, it's a program. If you take it on board, then you have to keep the promise and deliver. And this is, I think, the most important story, not to stop and thinking twice. Case of Belgium is very interesting because obviously, even if they deliver what they promise in the master plan, they don't stop. It's a digital transformation, which is continuous process and continuous improvement process. They have now Strive program, which is like post-master plan program, which will still improve their systems. So also this we have to keep in mind that this is not like all in all times you deliver the interlocking, you are done. No, this is a continuous process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what that does, a certain benefit is that you can just implement something faster if you know from the start that it doesn't have to be perfect, whatever perfect means, but there will be um, a pre-planned revision of what you have done in the first go once it's in operation and you had a bit of experience and you know what worked well and what could be improved. That's almost like a prototyping approach. That's probably better than yeah, basically being paralyzed because you try to make it 100% in the first run and nobody knows exactly how that 100% really looks like.
Yes, I think that the Belgium is again a very special case because they were very much informed client from very early days. I know colleagues there from like 1980s. They were very much involved in doing things themselves. So, for example, first electronic interlockings, they buy elements from suppliers and they build the interlockings themselves. Okay, so they were very much technically informed client. And if I look at the train operating companies, NCB, NMBS, then also there they bought installation kits and they installed the onboard ETCS themselves. This gives obviously advantages for later maintenance. Uh, Also, I think that in the master plan itself, the division between level one limited supervision, where they did things themselves completely, and level two, where they cooperated with supplier, yeah, were different tracks and different ways of doing things. But they have fantastic industrial engineers who really were focused on delivery, and this changed the things. Yeah. So I think
Mm,
that this is a distinction, maybe with other colleagues from other like infrastructure managers, where they are mostly busy with contracts and to less extent with technology itself and innovations and the way how to do it. Okay, there could be perfect infrastructure manager who runs the railways today in a very efficient way, but it doesn't mean that this team is prepared for implementing innovations. Yeah. So very often you see in Belgium, but it's a different story. But like in Denmark or in the Netherlands, there is a special program created around it, just to allow the people to implement the system without disturbing what's going on in the brownfield environment.
Mm. I want to change topics. Obviously, with an IRSE president, I think you are called now immediate past president, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, I want to talk about the IRSE presidency because many of the listeners will not have a full understanding of what it means. And I didn't have either, even though I'm a fellow of the organization. So we had a pre-talk where you said it's all up a 6-year program that leads into the presidency and out of the presidency. Give us a quick rundown how these 6 years look like and what they comprise of.
Okay. Yes, first of all, in my case, I was really very encouraged by my own colleagues in the Netherlands because they asked me to go and represent Netherlands in the council as one of the fellows. It started several years ago, and then after a number of years, you learn the organization better because you are then proactive in various committees. And then at certain stage, you will be like selected to go into presidential chain. And this presidential chain is long story, as you said, because today it starts with junior vice president, junior senior vice president, senior vice president, president, immediate past president, and then past president. So indeed, 6, 7 years involvement, and I think it's very good for continuity. Because obviously all of us are volunteers coming from various parts of the business. So we learn each other. We learn to better cooperate with each other and support each other. So this is very important, and I think for continuity of organization, like membership organization, is vital. So that's really, the long way to go. And I must say, I was very encouraged, like in Yokohama, where I organized Aspect 2025 last year, that I saw several past presidents, and not only last two, but like last six, attending still the Aspect conference. Even some of them are likely retired or less involved, but they are still with us, and that's very much. Yeah, I like because this is the heritage and this is the continuity of the organization. At the same time, I
Yes,
think that for me, I was looking at the demographics and I wanted to have in my ear different elements, okay, because my colleagues go very much technically about the team. I was thinking that there is a time to raise awareness that we need really younger people within the organization. So my team was really engaging Generation Unlimited, which was really dedicated for younger people. I think that finding a good balance between old and young generation is really very valid for us today.
I will get back to your presidential theme in a moment. This continuity thing, I believe, is something that IRSE has been doing for quite a while. I can remember like an iconic meeting that I had when I joined the IRSE with three IRSE presidents, the past one, the current one, and the incoming one. And they were all three on a business trip throughout Europe to look at different signaling installations. So that was the first time that I was exposed to this continuity between different presidents. And I always thought that's a good thing. But I don't think that at the time it was a process of 6 or 7 years with all these pre-roles like what's the junior senior vice president? I mean, that sounds like almost an artificial expansion of this continuity chain. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you in that regard, from an ISE perspective, this is fantastic. Having people like for 6 or 7 years in that presidential chain working together with their predecessors, with the successors, and that's fantastic for the IRSE. But from your employer's point of view, having you involved that heavily into the IRSE for such a long period of time, that must be very stressful. So I know that in the presidential year, you're pretty much traveling the world, and I wonder whether you got any work done for Mott MacDonald during that period at all. But if if there are several years before that, and even a couple of years after that, where you may have a similar amount of involvement. How do you square that with your employer, if I may ask?
Yeah, I think the situation is different for every person. Okay, we have presidents who are already like on their own, retired or pre-retired. There are people working in infrastructure managers or like me in the consultancy. Now, the involvement is not such a significant like during the presidential year. It's really much less. So it is my voluntary time really to be there and to participate. And obviously, you try to limit the burden for the company as much as possible. The presidential year is different story. You have to travel, you have to visit various international sections. Um, and it's also up to you how many. Yeah, so there were colleagues who visited almost every section in the world. I was selecting some of them, thinking that I better spend my time really on presidential lectures and encouraging young people. So it was limited, but obviously, company gave us super and perfect support for me, offering a time because time is really this value I needed here to be able to do my job as a president of IRSE. And still, I did the projects, my normal projects, which are yeah, hanging very much internationally, somewhere between Australia and North America. So it was in between. But for this, you need a team, and my team helped me very much. I was able to delegate some jobs to others, uh, and this also is a learning process. In attempts that you learn to do things like a team. You are not individual, and both at IRSC and with him, Mott MacDonald, we work in teams, and that's really encouraging. That's also what I learned during my MBA study, that you can try to perform yourself and be the best. But it's much more efficient to work in the teams, and that's what I like.
Yeah, yeah. Did you actually count how many countries you visited during your presidential year? I'm just curious.
Oh, not really, but I would say it was less than 10.
Okay, okay. Well, that's still a lot, given that those countries were all over the world. You mentioned Japan for the ASPEC conference, which is not directly around the corner from the Netherlands, and you were in Australia as well. I noticed that. Yeah, and in New Zealand as well, I believe. So there were a number of countries that are quite a bit away from your home. Yeah,
Yes, that's true. I would also include like Singapore, Hong Kong, US, Canada. But I think that if you work internationally, you're used to time changes. Also within
yeah,
IRSC, we have agreement that, for example, council meeting are in different time zones. So we call it we share the pain and organize the meetings at various parts of the day. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think the IRSE has become much better on this during over the years. Yeah, so for many years it was very much UK centric, and everything happened to Greenwich Mean Time. Doesn't matter which time zone that was in other countries and whether they needed to stay up halfway into the night or so. And but as you said, that has gotten much better with much more consideration of people in other time zones, which is good. Talking about your presidential theme, or first of all, when did you actually know that you would be president in 25, 26? And when did you start preparing for your presidential year, like thinking about the theme, organizing the presidential lectures, and so on?
Yeah. Yes, that's interesting question. Yes, I was a little bit surprised because in fact I should be the president 1 year later, but my colleague from Japan couldn't make it, so I had to jump like 1 year earlier. And what he brought with it is the situation was that I was one of the responsible for the aspect in Japan, which I didn't really expect to prepare everything on remote. So this was main really task to prepare well and carry on with Aspect 2025. And you can imagine that with different cultures, different yeah, way of thinking, and also distance was not so easy. Also, finding sponsors for such a conference on very remote location was very difficult. But the Japanese colleagues were really very much helpful. And also the colleague who was responsible for the technical organization of the conferences, you know him very well, Rob Cook, was fantastic in the teaming up and working together. And I think we were really very successful with organizing that conference. Also, Japanese side, I was involved in traveling to Japan since early 90s, was changing in terms of openness. So we were able to see many, many things which you normally want. Like, you know, where they are up to with the technology, where they are up to with the progress of innovations. Uh, and yes, the let's say the preparatory work really took 2 years about. Okay, so it is long time, and as I said, I was taken by surprise. So I had just 2 years to prepare things, because normally I was like, you know, expecting like 2 3 years to do things, and then you do okay thinking about presidential team. And as I said, I watched back the previous presidents, what they did, how did they perform, and it was a lot about technology. It was also about people. It was also about making institution global one. Steve Boshier from Australia was my best example of yeah bringing the change. Uh, our global office today was called once headquarter. And just to show that we are very much international, he changed the name to Global Office. And this brings different dimension. Okay, it's maybe easy change to do, but in fact, it was recognizing that we are much wider busy than only UK. On the other hand, I think that it's important to remember that 50% of our members are UK based, and so you have to always find a good balance what you do locally in United Kingdom and what you do elsewhere. Uh, Different places have different expectations, and it is ranging from like strategy up to membership fees, and you have to balance, and this is done through inviting people to be active in what we do together. So that's, I think, most important story. I very much yeah, put attention on the teaming and working together, because for me this is really making us stronger all together, like in the discipline. And the same applies really to like younger professionals and older colleagues. Yeah, the if you go to some of our meetings, you will see either only young people or very older ones, where I try to bring and build the bridges, because I think we can learn from each other. This is what I do daily with my team in Mott MacDonald. I can bring some kind of experience. They will bring enthusiasm and also curiosity needed really in our discipline. Uh, these links are very valid to keep the discipline ongoing and developing fast.
If this conversation makes you wanting to go deeper, visit my training platform at docfranktraining.com, the most comprehensive portfolio of online courses in advanced driveway signaling, CBTC, ETCS, high capacity signaling, and more. All in one place, all vendor neutral. But now, back to the show. Your presidential theme, Generation Unlimited, what do you mean by that, and how do you came to that? How did you come to that theme?
Oh, yes. Yes, I was very clear from the beginning that I need to, I want to have a link with young professionals, because this is what I do daily. I have opportunity to take people from universities like TU Delft in the Netherlands, and help them in their graduation works. And very often they stay with me, and they stay with the company, and they develop themselves. After maybe a couple of years, they might move further because it is not family, is not a marriage. It's just helping young professionals developing themselves. So some of my colleagues with whom I started like with a graduation job, they are now in Canada, for example. Yeah, so
Mm.
that's really good to see that, and this is my encouraging me very much that they look much wider than a standard engineer, and they try to discover things. Uh, Engaging Generation Limited is not my own team. It is UNESCO team, who was originally, let's say, which was originally meant to help younger people in their careers and their development. So I have somehow, I would not say stolen, but ran the team from UNESCO, and I think this brings also IRSC in a global picture much better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, nothing beats a good steal, yeah, if it's a good thing. Um, so so my understanding or my interpretation is that this is very much about bringing more young people into the industry and helping developing young people to compensate for the increasingly older demographic that we see in the RSE or maybe in railway. Um, so looking back at the year, do you think you moved the needle? Do you think that you instigated some change that will obviously continue over the next few years?
Yeah, good question. It can be only evaluated after a couple of times, not today and tomorrow. But what I did were like a series of presidential lectures. I think I made a record number of 10. So this is absolutely record in the IRC history to make so many. And you can question if it is quality of quantity, but for me it was important really to raise awareness for the younger people as much as possible. And what I see today is that in various locations, those people started to get together. It's not only UK, but also United States, also the Netherlands, also Australia. And this is encouraging me because that's what exactly what I wanted. I wanted also them to work internationally, so I still look for the opportunities to bring them together internationally. Yeah, Mm, there are other younger professional organizations like young professional railway professionals in UK, and I look at them really, what they do and how they do the things, what really young people need today, and you know, is it not very much different what we wanted like 30, 40 years ago? Just be together, have a fun, be curious and develop them yourself. Those elements are very much the same. I mentioned about my first days at the institution in Poland and the institute, research institute in Poland. Uh, and I see colleagues now telling me that, okay, they study electronics in Sheffield University and they went to work and they have to deal with mechanical interlockings. How it is possible? Yeah, so very much the same story. But we move in time, and I think that railways is a kind of heritage in a sense. It depends on the place, obviously. In Belgium, we have this modern system, but we go like I don't know, to Melbourne, where we have all the history of railways in one spot, and it will take time really to go up to digital. And it's not better or worse. It is just the historical development of the railways, financial situation of the country, and people. And I think that you try to manage your expectations as a young person and the place you are. Okay, my German colleagues always told me today that if younger colleagues join the organization, they want to work only maybe 3 days a week. They won't be sitting there 5 days. They want to see purpose in their work, which is maybe very much different watching the boss, what the boss is doing. No, the younger people want to see the purpose in their work and in this sense be active in getting there. Much more like social environment is for them important. So there are changes. And obviously technology, like social networks create, let's say, very fast exchange of information, but it doesn't mean that it will change quickly. Story like we are doing with the railways. Okay, it's so many assets we have in the in let's say in the railways. Changing the story just takes time, and this we have to recognize this, and this is why I think that yeah, smaller countries can move sometimes much more faster than the big ones. So nothing wrong with, but it's still a desire, to be better, and like in Singapore to have like continuous improvement. They call it Kaizen principle. I think that's what brings me really to learn every day and discover new things every day, because this makes the society better, and this makes me also better.
You just reflected back to your first days in Poland when you started your career. And back then, from what you said, the main recommendation of your older colleagues was don't hurry so much with that new technology. Yeah, you've got time, and we have existing legacy systems that work fine. Would you give the same advice to young people today now that you are in such a senior position, or how would your advice look like today to somebody just starting off in the industry?
I think that the time changed very much from my early days of career. Today we have technology which is developing much faster. Yeah, at that time it was like obsolescence being a trigger for a new technology, new technological approach. Today with the digitalization, it's a continuous approach. It's not like, breaking innovations, just really evolving and still with increased speed. So this is why I would say don't wait, just go on and get up to date, and also have a vision, because what is needed is really a vision for the future, where we will be in like 20, 30 years. All young people who come to organization like Mott MacDonald, who work with me, I ask the first question is, what would you like to be in 10, 15 years from now? They have no idea. Some of them have. Okay. But also, what is your vision about where we'd like the discipline to be in 20, 30 years? And for them, it's like, a horizon. Okay. So now I started to say what it will be 5, 10 years, because it is going so fast that we really can't predict what it will be in 20, 25 years from now. Uh, so not wait, don't wait. It is much more important really to move with the technology and find it, like encouraging to see really what is possible today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think an important skill will be to be able to roll with the punches, to um, adopt new technology as it comes along. I'm just trying to imagine if somebody has asked me or you 20 years ago how the industry would look like in 20 years. I don't think either of us would have given a halfway correct answer. And and with the innovation cycles getting shorter and shorter, and the amount of knowledge growing exponentially, the amount of new ideas and so on, I think it will get more and more difficult to predict over such a long period of time what's going to happen. So anything I would tell you today, what Doc Frank's going to do in 2046, is almost certainly entirely wrong. Yeah. So if I have a match rate of like 10%, I have probably done a pretty good job. So
I fully,
yeah.
I fully agree with this, Frank. And one day I was finding myself sitting in the Transport Advisory Committee of European Commission, and there were professors from all over Europe discussing the what Europe will be 2050 from energy and transport perspective. And I was the only engineer there. Okay, there were sociologists and all other people, all professors from famous universities. And I asked them, why don't you take your students? and ask them what they will feel like, what they should be their future, because it won't be future for you. And next time we took the students with us on the meeting, and it was completely different discussion. It was very fantastic experience really to see that yeah, depending on generation, the expectations are completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. I think we are now in such a fast developing world that we really can't predict what it will be like 30, 50 years from now. So those ones who tell me that we will finish deployment in Germany in 2080 or 2070, I can't believe it, because I think that we will have it different technologies at that time and different way of running railways, likely. Yeah.
I was just thinking, if somebody would have been asked like 10 years ago, where will ETCS be in 2030? They would have said, ETCS will be rolled out on all the 10T corridors on the entire European core network. Well, what makes you say that? What makes you be so certain? Oh, well, because it's in the law. It's a requirement by law to have all the corridors fitted by 2030. Now, looking at today, with only 4 years to go to 2030, it will be very clear that only about half of the corridors will be fitted by 2030 if we're lucky. And even by 2050, not all the corridors are expected to be fitted. So, and that takes back to the to your earlier point of the disappointingly slow rollout pace of ETCS. If you can't even rely on something that you put into the law, then yeah, well, how else should you be able to predict anything in the industry, right? That has any chance of realistic implementation.
Yes, I think we have a European coordinator in Europe about ETCS, and he is preparing working plans. Those plans are changed frequently,
Yes. Yes.
recognizing that yeah, that we are too slow. Just okay, but I think Belgian case is uh, somehow bringing a kind of positive change. Okay, it's the first country really after smaller countries like Luxembourg or even recalling Switzerland, to have fully equipped network. And I must say that if you ask me 5 years ago, would they manage? I would say, oh, it will be very hard. But if you look at let's say, what they did over the last 3, 4 years of the implementation, the speed up really very quickly. In average in Europe, if you will find the railway introducing ETCS with like 300 kilometers a year, it is good. Okay. But Belgians did over the last 2 years more than 1,000.
Yeah.
And this is because of the way how they do, and it was not without sacrification. Okay, so they stop other various infrastructure works, which means that today they will have also reworks to do, but it's something for something. But the goal was accomplished, and the goal was really safety. Yeah, so from that perspective, they were very, very clear about the objective and what they wanted to go, let's say, and to achieve. Uh, Other countries, I think, still have like a little, yeah, diluted thinking about what is really the objective. And this makes delivery much more difficult.
Yes, I think to put something like ETCS as priority number one for a country, you really have to be convinced that this is the right thing to do, that this is the best way of spending your time, your effort, your money, and so on. And I think this conviction is really still missing in many countries. I was carefully hopeful for Germany over the last few years because of their digital rail Germany concept they came up with, where I thought they now seem to have found the formula how ETCS can fit as a cornerstone into a wider digitalization picture that is beneficial for the country. But even with that, the rollout is still not as fast or as accelerated as you would have hoped for. And I'm wondering what else can be done to really define ETCS as such a top priority that you even let other infrastructure projects fall back and park by the wayside just in order to get your ETCS program done and the whole country fitted. And then you come back to all the other infrastructure work. And you may find that it's much easier to implement once you are in the new technology, once you have ETCS installed.
Yes, I think I look very much on neighboring country, Germany, in terms of implementing ETCS. And I have full respect really what's going on there. Okay, we can complain. Okay, it's for very low speed, but it's also, let's say, depending where you are as an infrastructure manager with state of your assets and the priorities you would need to take. Uh, I think that in a sense the plans were clear like few years ago. There were enough studies, and as you said, ETCS is only a small element in the total digitalization of railways. Uh, so I think they overlook this very well, and also setting now priorities over last like 2 3 years, focusing on digital interlockings. Don't forget that Germany has still mechanical interlockings, relay interlockings, and the, that digitalization is also this part of the story about signaling and train control. I think at the moment they have only like 25-30% of electronic interlockings. So the idea really to deploy ETCS wider, and especially on corridors is there. I think the German railways put a lot of attention into future railway radio. So FRMCS is really a core enabler for Germany really to proceed much faster. Uh, so so now I think for 1 month they have like a kind of coordination unit within Ministry of Transport, which will try to oversee the deployment. So there are all good steps, and I think there are necessary steps really to get to move. They have framework contracts with industry, so all is in place. It's a question of people, and I think there was a study like 3 years ago indicating that just industry itself must be preparing for such a big program, which I saw some estimates where there was an indication that full industry in Germany won't be able to move faster than 1,000 kilometers a year. Uh, so it's also about people. It's not only about technology and the way how you implement it.
That's true, but it also depends on the process, right? I in the last ERTMS work plan there was that term industrialization, and I thought that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned it as well with the Belgian approach
Yes.
to get their network fitted and to be so fast. And if you think about industrialization, you think about a factory, you think about a production line, but you need to meet certain requirements to make this work. If you have a production line in a factory where you change the production line, you modify it every second day, you're not going to get any efficiencies. So what that means, and I think Belgium has probably done that,
Yeah.
is to really to fix and freeze a certain specification, certain requirements for project delivery, so that you can get almost into a kind of cookie cutter approach where a project delivery really becomes repeatable. And I think if you were asking anybody from the supply industry, how can you get to 1,000 kilometers a year? This is exactly what they would tell you. If you reinvent the wheel in every new project, there is no chance that you can get there. You need to achieve a certain amount of repeatability to enable a more industrialized approach. Would you agree?
Uh, yes, absolutely. But I think it applies really to whole life cycle, not only like to implementing, but also approvals. In case of Germany,
Yes.
there is a sticking point at the approvals. And this is what Belgians let's say, were doing much more clever. The early days of ETCS deployment, they sit together with the safety authority, and they discovered that this will be blocking point. So they agreed that they will approve through safety authority generic application, and that every line deployment will be only looking for delta. This speed up, let's say, the whole process drastically. Similar story I observed in Denmark, where safety authority found themselves like, hey, what is this now? What shall we do as a safety authority? So they prepare their own special plan to let's say, approve ETCS. I think this part is still missing in Germany and needs really attention. This will speed up quickly, let's say, the process of not only like physical implementation, but also of approval and getting into operation. So absolutely yes, but it needs a little bit wider consideration than the only like industrialization in terms of production. It is only also about deployment. It's also about approvals. Then you get there.
A question out of personal interest, how important do you think is testing and especially national coordination of testing between different projects? Is that something that you have observed in Belgium that you would think was one of their strengths?
I think there is obviously a common interoperability lab. There are few suppliers active there. My best example is my own country, the Netherlands, where we have like a rail center where we try to eliminate as much as possible physical testing. So in the rail center, we have most of the lines where ETCS is going to be implemented digitalized. So supplier with onboard equipment from Spain can call the rail center and run virtually the train on our network. This speeds up really fantastic the way of testing and also take away the burden of making slots for testing on the real lines. Yeah, so I think that this is also the future of testing to make it much more digital, if I can say so. And also if you look a little bit further, because that's what I observe also in those countries who already have ETCS, it's also about how do you deal with maintenance. ETCS and also like CBTC projects, they offer a new story, predictive maintenance. You can see it in countries like Singapore, where they already have very much move for data analytics and predictive maintenance and give like a new dimension for what we how we deal with the digital systems. Uh, I think that this element of the story of European train control system is still very much forgotten in many countries and should be taken on board as quickly as possible, just to encompass the whole life cycle of the system and use really what is possible today.
Yeah, yeah. I'm conscious of your time. We always run out of this hour, and I told you before that
You
would
promise 1 hour,
fly.
huh?
That
Yeah.
would fly in no time. I wanted to give you some space to talk about one or two memorable events from your presidential year. And I know it's a difficult question because there are probably so many that if you talk about one, you automatically neglect a number of others. Is there anything where you can look back in that presidential year where you think that was particularly memorable or surprising to you? You didn't expect it, or so. What would it be if you just pick one?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I must say,
I know.
during the year, in any place where I was, starting from Switzerland via United States, Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, and Australia, and obviously the Netherlands, UK. Uh, yeah, I was really encouraged by openness, an open door. Uh, this brings me a kind of warm feeling for the institution. Uh, because we are in various places in the world, we are like on distance, we have our mindsets, we have our way of thinking, but a kind of yeah, kindness and warm reception was everywhere. There was no exception on this. Uh, this brings me also hope, let's say, that those colleagues who like receive me in the various countries will look at the institution and the needs, let's say, to modernize, okay, in the common. Yeah, it's not like, on the single place. It's like community. We share pain and we share successes. and you would like to move forward. I think this is something what I would like to mention also, that we have developed within Council a kind of strategy 2030. And we would like to see IRSE really developing faster and much more as a community of individuals, but also of sections, and being stronger. Okay, one of the elements during the year was also work of my colleagues towards the Real Charter in UK. This bring also different dimension for the institution in UK, but also worldwide. And yeah, works which we do in other places on licensing or competency assessment are also like encouraging. I hope that we can be able, let's say, to work together with NTC in Australia on this for ETCS. Could be like a linking pin, let's say, through various competency assessment schemes in various states in Australia, just to bring it under one roof for our particular discipline. I hope that this will help also places like in Australia to digitalize faster and to have common mindset and also sharing people, because the big issue today we have is really lack of people and experienced people. So if we can standardize a little bit those processes, it will help us to be better as a sector.
That was a very presidential answer. Yeah, you were asked to name one specific example, and you spent the entire word in your response. If somebody approached you next week and say, Bogdan, you have the unique opportunity to be the first IRSE president who can go for a second year in April 2027, would you say yes?
Uh, no, because I think that it's enough for a year. I mean, the continuity is obviously an issue, but I prefer to give the chances to others to be better than me, and they will have my full support in whatever they do, because I think it is not individual story; it's a teamwork, as I said. And so you will always find yeah, a right moment of doing things. Yeah.
Yes. So you had your 1 year on the top, and that should be enough. Others should have the same opportunity as well. Bogdan, thank you very much for that talk. I found it very inspiring, and I hope that our listeners will feel the same. I'm really glad that I got you on the show. Thank you very much for your time, and all the best for your next nearly 2 years of past presidency. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Frank. Yes.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Yes, bye.
Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you like the content, then the best way you make sure that you don't miss out on any of the future episodes, just subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you also get access to all the previous episodes, which I'm pretty sure there will be many that are of interest to you. Another thing that you can do to help not just your own environment, but the entire industry, is to share this episode with friends and co-workers, because it helps more people in our industry to get educated, and an educated rail signaling industry is a better industry. With that said, thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon, and bye for now.